The wisest person I ever met in my life, a third grade dropout. Wisest and dropout in the same sentence is rather oxymoronic, like jumbo shrimp. Like fun run, ain't nothing fun about it. Like Microsoft Works, y'all don't hear me. I used to say like country music, but I've lived in Texas so long, I love country music now. I hunt, I fish, I have cowboy boots and cowboy. Y'all, I'm a blackneck redneck. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? No longer oxymoronic for me to say country music. And it's not oxymoronic for me to say third grade and dropout. That third grade dropout, the wisest person I ever met in my life, who taught me to combine knowledge and wisdom to make an impact, was my father. A simple cook. Wisest man I ever met in my life. Just a simple cook. Left school in the third grade to help out on the family farm, but just because he left school doesn't mean his education stopped. Mark Twain once said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." My father taught himself how to read, taught himself how to write, decided in the midst of Jim Crowism, as America was breathing the last gasp of the Civil War, my father decided he was going to stand and be a man. Not a black man, not a brown man, not a white man, but a man. He literally challenged himself to be the best that he could all the days of his life. I have 4 degrees. My brother is a judge. We're not the smartest ones in our family. It's a third grade dropout daddy. A third grade dropout daddy who was quoting Michelangelo, saying to us, "Boys, I won't have a problem if you aim high and miss, but I'm going to have a real issue if you aim low and hit." A country mother quoting Henry Ford, saying, "If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right." I learned that from a third grade drop. Simple lessons. Lessons like these. Son, you'd rather be an hour early than a minute late. We never knew what time it was at my house because the clocks were always ahead. My mother said for nearly 30 years my father left the house at 3:45 in the morning. One day she asked him, "Why, Daddy?" He said, "Maybe one of my boys will catch me in the act of excellence. I want to share 2 things with you. Aristotle said you are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act." Don't ever forget that. I know you're tough, but always remember to be kind. Always. Don't ever forget that. Never embarrass mama.
Good morning, family, and welcome back to another Motivational Friday. My name is Mel Wells, servant of One Day at a Time, servant of the city of Philadelphia. Most of all, what I'm proud of, servant of my community, aka my hood. And today, I want to come here to be able to inspire those who have been chosen by God, and to allow you to know, especially to the One Day at a Time members, the clients, those who have been struggling, to let you know and reaffirm that you have been chosen. You say, "How do you know that I have been chosen?" Why? Because I have to realize that I have been chosen. And today, the topic we're going to be talking about, God chooses fools to prove the wise wrong. To prove the world wrong. I'd rather be a fool for God than wise for the world. Why? Because he will always use you and me, especially ODAAT people, especially those in recovery who have been suffering. Maybe you're not understanding the storm. Maybe you got one day clean and one day at a time. Maybe you just came onto the ODAAT staff, but for some reason, God chose you to prove the world wrong. And I know I'm not trying to come here and just call you old fool, but that's the truth, right? We have to humble out and understand that we all have a little foolishness in us, and that it's actually awesome to be a fool when it's a fool for God. If any of y'all remember Sanford and Son, right? You remember Esther used to come up there and used to say, "You old fish-eyed fool," right? And so today I want to get talking about, how does God choose fools to use to prove the world wrong, to prove the smartest people wrong? And let's just jump into it. But I really want to make sure that we highlight and getting this to those who have been suffering, those who just came into One Day at a Time. So enough talk. Let's just get into this, right, family? And my wife will come after this and have some other announcements. Let's go. God chooses people who the world calls fools. Now you're like, "Mel, where's that in the Bible? How does this relate to recovery?" If you are in One Day at a Time, or if you're dealing with some type of recovery, you know that some place in your life, somebody was looking at you as a fool. And I want to turn that around and say, guess what? That was a good thing. It was a good thing that somebody looked at you as a black sheep. There was a good thing that somebody looked at you as a throwaway. Why is that a good thing? When they hung Jesus Christ even on the cross, guess what they looked at him as? As a fool. The smartest Jews all came around and said that we told you that he was a criminal. We told you that he was a liar. But when God used his own son for his glory, he was able to rise again. And they had to say, uh-oh, guess what? The fool has risen. So I'm here today to give you some information to help you to be risen up by God, to actually help you be able to level up by God. And so let's jump into 1 Corinthians 27:9. This is not preaching or none of this stuff, but I want to highlight to show you the proof about where I'm getting information from. And then I'm going to run through this real quick because I know everybody is busy, but please click subscribe. Please share the information because I'm telling you, it is awesome to be a fool for God than wise for this lonely world, right? So 1 Corinthians 1, it says, instead, God deliberately chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. There's a lot of people that say, oh, you can't do that. You don't have this degree. You didn't come from this family background. You're not rich enough. Guess what? God want to choose you to prove all the critics wrong, right? And he says, and he chose those who are powerless to shame those who are powerful. So it's great to be weak. To those who are homeless, those who just came into the program, those who just came onto staff, even if you're sharing and just listening to this right now, maybe you feel like you need to be more powerful right now. But maybe that's not really the case. You need to understand that God chooses your weakness to prove the powerful wrong, right? And I want to jump through this real quick. So that was 1 Corinthians 27:9. I want everybody to understand the reason why I always be sharing Bible scriptures or whatever. It was taught to me by my mother and my father, the Reverend Wells, the one and only Reverend Wells. He said, Mel, let me tell you something. You could come up with all this recovery stuff, but recovery is a God process. They have to be willing to surrender to a power higher than them, right? He even said, Mel, when you have staff, guess what? They had to rely on God to be able to level them up, to give them something bigger than their job so they can find a purpose in their passion, right? So that's 1 Corinthians 1:27. 1 Corinthians 1:27 wrote the note wrong. But God chooses to prove the world wrong. He does not choose the wise. Listen, he does not choose the wise. But God chooses people who used to lie. God chooses people who used to lie on people. God chooses people who done stole from people. God chooses high school dropouts. God chooses drug addicts. God chooses ex-offenders. And sometimes even the murderer. God can turn anything around. And I think that for people, when you come through recovery, we have to realize that we don't know it all. We can't come into help telling people how to help us. We can't be on staff trying to tell people that, you need to get off of drugs, you need to do these things or whatever, and not actually understanding how God has chosen us to stop being a fool as well, to help us be his fool, to actually prove the world wrong. So whether you're on staff, whether you're a client, guess what? We are all fools together. You old fish-eyed fool. It's a good thing to be called a fool. So don't feel bad about that, right? And so jumping into the second point, God chooses the weak people to prove the powerful wrong. He chooses the weakest people to choose the powerful wrong. I can think of Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart's a short dude. Shout out to Kev, right? But Kevin Hart is more powerful. Coming from North Philadelphia, shout out to the Allegheny area, up there to Erie Avenue area and all that type of stuff, right? Where Kevin Hart came from, one of the worstest areas. Now look at it. Now he's a giant. Even though he's short, he's a giant to some of the most powerful people. Why? He allowed God to use his weakness. What about you? Are you trying to be too strong for God? God don't want to help out those who think they're strong. He want to be able to help out those who are weak, to be able to prove that his glory is much better than whatever human glory it can be. And I'm talking about recovery. Are you willing for God to choose you to help level you up and help you out with your recovery? We're going to keep going through this so we can end this out, right? He chooses the addict, the weak addict, the black sheep of the family, to become the leader of their family or the savior of their family. How, Mel, do you know that? Why? Because I was on drugs. I was running around on the streets. And I'm the youngest in my family. Never did I thought that or even think or even imagine that I would actually have to become the servant of my family. Without my mom and dad and being the youngest, not the leader. Be careful with that, right? Stay humble, but I am the servant of my family. And I was once called the black sheep. What about you? The black sheep that's out there looking at. God's going to turn this around, but you have to depend on God's power. And how do you depend on God's power and recovery, y'all? I need help. I need help. And when you say I need help, that's being honest towards God. Even if you don't know how to pray, maybe you don't know how to pray. Sometimes it's raising your hand in group. Sometimes it's going in your bedroom at night while the other person may not be in there, just getting on your knees. Maybe you don't know how to pray for real in your recovery, right? And you just say, God, I need help. That's all you need to do. The rest of it, he will line it up for you, right? I want to make sure we keep going through this, right? He chooses the single moms. Shout out to the single moms. The single mom who is looking for that great marriage. The single mom who may have dropped out of school. The single mom even, I'm starting to see some kids in school, in college and in twilight programs who take their kids to school with them. Shout out to the single mom, right? That needed help, but became the savior of her family. That single mom who was left home because her husband was killed or murdered on the street, or her husband died from an overdose. Shout out to the single moms, right? For making things work. Yes, they are weak, but God make them strong. Shout out to y'all. I really appreciate the moms, me not having a mom, but I could not imagine how hard it is for a single mom. I learned a little bit of that from my own wife, who is a single mom. But God blesses her with a marriage. He blesses her with children. Why? Because she was able to admit she was weak. Maybe you're too strong for that. Don't be too strong to the point where God can't use you. Let's keep going on, right? He chooses that mom to become the savior of the family. He chooses that mom who's looking at the screen right now and you saying, I need a relationship. No, hold up a little bit. God going to bless you as long as you go through this process. Long as you go through this process as a weak individual, he will bless you with a marriage. He will bless you with a man. He will bless you where you will have that money. You will have those balloons at the graduate. God is in the business of proving the world wrong, y'all. Please, let's follow this out, right? I don't want to get too caught up in this, right? And the last part is this right here. Number 3, one day at a time was started by the one and only Reverend Wells, a high school dropout. A man who did all type of drugs, shot a lot of people. A man who was on death row. He chose Tim to start a program. And I'm talking to the client. Hear what I'm saying here, y'all? A guy who used to eat out the trash can, sleep on benches, used to run crack houses on death row. He chose Reverend Wells to start a program like one day at a time. Now we have over 100 employees, maybe 200 to 300 people sleeping in beds and everything like that. God chose Tim to actually now have people, even though he is past, rest in peace, he looking down with mom, he has people even still working for him with master degrees. He chose a fool to prove the world wrong. It's funny how in the city of Philadelphia, I go to these big time directors meetings, and a lot of them just trying to figure out, they've been to Harvard and everywhere, they're trying to figure out exactly how did Reverend Wells do it? Why? He admitted he was a fool. He admitted he was weak, and God used him to crush the powerful, those who thought they were smart, right? Let's go through this, right? Guess who else God chose who was a high school dropout? The President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's mom died at a very young age. He had to learn how to educate himself. Now, he did other things with his education later on in life, but a man like that became the President of the United States. What about you, right? He also chose a guy named Detroit Red, who was a thief. A thief. He chose a thief. Remember Jesus on the cross, he had a thief and a robber next to him, whatever. He chose a thief named Detroit Red, a liar, a robber, a drug addict, to become Malcolm X. I'd rather be weak for God than wise for this world. He even chose a guy like me who dropped out of high school twice. Yep, a lot of y'all probably don't even know that. Dropped out of high school twice, wanting to sell drugs and do all these things. But just a few weeks ago, my school notified me that, Mel, you will be graduating with your associate's degree. Shout out to my whole team. Because I had to be honest to people like Joby, who was my tutor, to Jen. I said, look, I can talk well. I can do a lot of things well. But this education piece is a little weak piece for me because I just don't know how to figure it out. But when I sit down, I'm able to do it. I'm able to, read and articulate all the words and pass tests. And I can do all that. But I had to be honest to my team that I was weak. Miss Charmaine Matlock Turner, Senator Sharif Street, and they said, no, Mel, We're going to allow you to go through this process so you can prove the powerful wrong, that Mel can get that piece of paper. Shout out even to my family and wife, right? Just for, bearing in there with me with the tests and everything. And I'll probably go a whole nother level with that college piece. Jennifer, I can hear you listening like, no, you're going to move up to bachelor and master. We on that road, right? But God chose me, an ex-offender, a drug addict, to become the president of One Day at a Time. The most thing I'm proud of is a great son to my mom and dad. Even though they're not here, I love making my mom and dad proud. Most of all, what I'm proud of is that I'm a father and a husband. God chose me to prove the naysayers, the critics wrong. Real question here is, are you going to humble out? Are you willing to drop your pride and open your heart to become a fool for God? Fools for God always prove the wise wrong, because it's always about God recovery story, not yours. He only got you off of drugs. He only gave you a job to prove all those haters wrong. So don't take no pride in that, because it also talks about be careful to think you are standing firm, because that's when you will fall. Family, I cannot wait when you allow God to choose you by just raising your hand saying, hey, my name is such and such. I'm an addict. I need help. Hey, my name is such and such. I'm new to the staff. I need help. Hey, my name is such and such. I got a master's degree, but I can't figure out how to do outreach right, or how can I do this right? Why? Because we all in this together. Shout out to the city of Philadelphia. May we be able to stop this gun violence that is on the rise, the poverty rates that are on the rise, those who need jobs. And I just stop with a moment of silence for our city, those who have passed away from COVID. Even though the restrictions and things are changing up a little bit, people are still dying in hospitals. People are still dying in India. Babies are still being murdered on the streets of city of Philadelphia, all the way over to Chicago and California. And also a moment of silence for that addict, that person who just came home, that person who wants to change their life and says that I'm willing to take a chance and say, I need help. You don't have to be a drug addict to say you need help. You have to be a human being to be honest and say, I am weak, but I want God to use me to prove the wise and the powerful wrong. Family, my name is Mel Wells. Hopefully, you're ready to sign up to be a fool for God. You know how they say, act a fool? Who that? ODAAT, act a fool, family. Peace and blessings. Now, my wife is going to come in and give you some great announcements about some of the events and some of the things that we have put in place here at One Day at a Time. If nobody tells you, I love you. Bye.
Thank you so much for that amazing Friday motivational group. Thank you for even a shout out to the single parents, the single mothers who went through the storm, but thank God, with God's grace, I'm not a single mother no more. Thank God for that. Also, just want to give out a couple shout outs, like Naya's birthday. Happy birthday, Naya. We appreciate you at ODAAT, all the work you do. We appreciate that. Also, we have a new street team that will be cleaning from 24th to 25th in Lehigh. Another thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure, whether you Muslim, Christians, prayer, du'as, please keep Jennifer in prayer as she's going through things, family things with her mom. Keep her mom uplifted in your prayer, and keep sending hugs and love Jennifer's way. And also YRM. Let's go. YRM, y'all got to get these kids signed up. It's a free camp. Who say no to free camp, free trips? Oh, come on. It's free. Sign your kids up for YRM camp so they could be busy this summer. COVID restrictions lifting. Still, be safe, do social distancing, and enjoy YRM camp. So you could contact Brianna, the YRM staff. Contact the ODAAT office. Ask for Brianna, said even Ebony, to get your child signed up. Thank you so much for joining Friday's motivational group. Have a good day. Who that? ODAAT, man.